Hi, I'm Doug, your tech support representative here at Atlantic British. In this video we're going to touch base on something that's been now showing up on some of the supercharged 4.2s on both the full-size Range Rover and the Sport. And what's happening is that the throttle bodies are actually the motors that operate the throttle plate in the throttle bodies are starting to break down from overheating. And how that happens is because of the location of the throttle body. On the regular 4.4, the naturally aspirated, it's up front and within the breeze of the fan, and it doesn't run as hot, plus it has a cooler in it. Whereas with the supercharged, it's actually buried back towards the back of the engine down in an area that really doesn't get a lot of ventilation, and so it runs in a much hotter area. So we're finding what happens is going down the road under certain conditions, all of a sudden the vehicle will surge or start losing throttle response. There's a number of different functions in there. Sometimes it may not even kick a fault code when it happens. So we're finding that this seems to be the cause of the majority of them. I've actually done a few over the years, and it does solve that problem. And essentially all you need parts-wise is a replacement throttle body. This is original equipment. This is all that you can get right now. The aftermarket companies aren't making these. And a new gasket. And the rest is basically just going to be labor to access it and replace it. And you'll see that both are original part numbers, and we find that of course they work the best, but again, because of where they're located and the design, they do break down over a period of time. So what I'm going to do is show you how to do the repair on that and fix that problem. Alright, before we begin, what I'm going to do is just give you a quick rundown of some of the tools you may need to do this repair. And as you can see, I've got two hose pinch pliers, which can be substituted different sizes, or small vice grips or anything in that line. I prefer these because they don't cut into the hose. A long pair of 45-degree angle needle nose, though you can still get in there with a regular needle nose. This just makes the job easier. Small pair of slip joint pliers. Long extension for 1/4-inch drive, along with a 7mm universal. An 8mm deep. A 8mm universal with a shorter extension. You can see I have two 1/4-inch drives here. You can get away with just one with a 7mm deep, and a straight blade screwdriver, number 3, and a flashlight for a little extra light so you can see in the back side. So these are the tools basically that'll get you through the job. So it's not a lot required, but the universals do definitely make the job easier. So let's begin showing you how to repair this vehicle. So we're going to start with disassembling the top cover. It's just a matter of 4 10mm nuts all the way around, and we'll have to also remove the oil fill cap because that gets in the way. We'll just set that to the side so we don't forget it. And these are just hold downs for just a plastic shield that is there more for aesthetics than any mechanical function. Alright, so once the nuts are off, we just simply lift it and remove the cover. Next step is going to be to remove the intake plenum right here. And this is just nothing more than 2 clamps on each end with a screwdriver. We're going to back them off quite a bit. And then right here, there's also a breather tube. And you see some serrated edges on each side. And that's the area where you're going to put your fingers and squeeze. You can use a pair of pliers also if you got one that's really stuck. Which in most cases, if they haven't been removed in a while, is the case. Alright, so we removed the plenum. We got that off. Most of the time you're going to find this rubber grommet right here is going to stick and stay on the snorkel, or what we refer to as the cobra. We're going to basically pop that back into place so we don't forget it later, because it has 2 tabs that actually reach around the lip that's on this clamp, so you want to make sure you put it on there first. So get that out of the way. So to remove the cobra, essentially you'll see you have a steel line that runs across the back that has 2 8mm screws that lock that down to the top of this. We're going to take those 2 screws out, and then there's a clamp on the bottom that clamps around the bottom of this the cobra we refer to, that clamps into the top of the throttle body. So we're going to essentially loosen up that clamp, take those 2 bolts out, and then there's just a slide pin in the front. We'll work this out towards us. It'll slide off the pin, and that piece will be right out. So now that we got the cobra off, you'll see right on top, we've got another rubber boot right on top of the throttle body. We need to remove it because it obstructs the access to the 4 screws that we got to take out to remove that. So you'll see you basically have 2 clamps. We loosen up the top one to get the cobra or the top snorkel out. Once we've done that, now we can get to the bottom one. Now you can either use a short screwdriver, or I'd like to use like a long extension that I have here, and a universal socket. It'll be a 7mm we'll put on there, and then we take this boot out. Then we can access the 4 screws, and it's just a couple hoses that attach in the back, and we'll have this throttle body out. Alright, so we've got the boot off, and don't be afraid to pull up on it. It's going to be a little tight, especially if this is the first time off. The rubber will have a tendency to stick to the aluminum, so you may need to work it around with a little screwdriver or just tug in different areas for a while, and eventually it'll come up. So we have that out of the way. Now the next step is going to be to get to the electrical connector right here, and that plugs right into the throttle body, and this is your electrical connection for your throttle plate control. So that's just a matter of it's a squeeze tab, work it back and forth, and that'll pop out of there. And then what we'll be doing is clamping off these 2 small hoses right here. These are for the throttle plate heater. This holds coolant, and so that we're not dumping coolant all over the place and then down into the intake while we're working on this. We're going to take, I have hose clamp pliers, which you could use small vice grips, or run down to your local store and then grab yourself a pair of those. While you got this off, you always want to take a quick look. Here's the connector who runs in. Make sure there's no corrosion. Make sure there's no loose pins half hanging out. And as I say, there's your squeeze tab, which you're going to use to remove, and that is actually going to be on the side next to this hose right here, so it's a little tight to get into. So once we get that out of the way, we're going to push this harness back and move that, and then we'll clamp off the 2 hoses. Once clamped off, you can see now you have access to one of the clamps on the outer hose. We've basically clamped this and moved the hose clamp out of the way. This is a very long angled pair of needle nose pliers. You can even get in there with regular needle nose. I just find using these are a bit easier. And it's just a matter of squeeze it, slowly work it up the hose and get it out of the way. And we just flip the pliers over. And lift it right off. And you can see by clamping it, we only lose just a very little bit of coolant. That'll just drip down the back. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to unbolt the throttle body so that we can gain access to that back clamp to get this second hose off. Okay, so we removed the 4 8mm head screws that hold the throttle body down. This way you're able to turn it, squeeze the clamp, and get the back hose off. So essentially at this point, we're disconnected with the wiring. We'll slide that out, and there is your old throttle body. This is the component that fails on them. They get hot and then they end up creating an issue with the throttle plate control. Here's where your 2 lines attach for your 2 coolant lines, and then to seal the connection you have the steel gasket. So we'll take both of those out. So now you just want to get in with a rag. You want to clean up the surface that the throttle body sits on. Make sure that that's clean. Double check the bottom of the new one. Make sure that's clean. And then what you do is you're going to install the gasket onto the new one, and I'll explain why these 4 little tabs are in the hole. Alright, so now we're ready for reassembly, and like I said, we want to wipe the area off to make sure that there's no dirt or anything. I generally like to use my fingers only because in many cases if you grab a dirty rag or a rag with a lot of lint on it, whereas with your fingers, no lint, no dirt, and we just get that little bit of film off. So now I'll show you why they put these little fingers on the gasket. Now it doesn't matter whether you go up or down, it's still going to seal, but you'll notice that the offset of the holes are different. So we're going to line those up, and then we'll take one of the bolts for the throttle body and slide that up through, and then it'll just seat itself in there, and you'll notice as you push up on it, it raises the gasket. Well, that's because those fingers are designed to grab in the tread area. So there we're going to just run that one bolt in. And the reason for this is as you lower it down into that almost non-accessible hole, if that gasket were to slip out of place, you would never know it, and then you end up doing the job twice. So essentially what you've done by having the fingers on there, and then we got the gasket in place and it's hanging under, and we're just going to set this down in there until those small studs on the bottom of the bolts drop in the hole, and we know we're lined up and everything's in place where it should be. Now we'll do just that. We'll go in at an angle just like we came out. Okay, so we've done just that. We've slid this in, we dropped it in. We could feel the screws drop down in the holes. You can actually use this one front hole as sort of an orientation. And now you just thread a couple threads and then pull back up on the bolt. If it doesn't come up, you know you're down in the right and you're in the hole. So now we can put the other two in, and then we're just going to go around and just lock them all down into place, get them good and snug. And then as far as reassembly goes, we're basically going to just reverse the order that we did, where this back cooling hose is going to be attached here. We'll slide the clamp over, we'll put the second hose on, put the connection on, and then we can just start reassembling the top of the motor. Alright, just something I'm going to mention now, just in case you're thinking of this. When I pop that back hose on, okay, we want to make sure that the clamp is in its right position. It's all the way down, that the hose is fully attached. Don't think at this point that you can release this tool, because what will happen when you do, it's just going to push right through and blow out the opening that we still have yet to put the other hose on. Just a note. Alright, so we've locked down the throttle body in place, alternately locking down each bolt until they're good and snug. There really was no torque spec for it. You just got to basically by feel. It's just got to feel good and tight. The two hoses are on. We check our clamps to make sure they're back in the original positions and down low enough so that they're not going to lose tension and blow the hose off. And then we've got our electrical connector back there, which is just a matter of insert, press, and listen for the click. Our steel line right here is still movable, so we're not pinched by a wire harness, so we know that when we put the Cobra back in, we're going to be able to slide that up and put the 4 bolts back in. So at this point, what we want to do is we're going to get our lower boot back on, and we'll just spin that because there's a lip there, and that make sure that that lip seats against the top of the throttle body. And then you want the clamp in a position so that you can get at it with a long extension and a universal, and we'll lock that down. Alright, so now boot's in place, we got the clamp locked down, we're good and snug. Check around with our fingers just to make sure we don't feel any big gaps telling us that that boot is in cockeyed. That looks pretty good. So then we'll slide the upper clamp over the top, and again put that in a position where we can get at it with the long extension in the socket. And then we're going to lower our Cobra in place. Now, remember when we took this apart, we saw this insulator. Make sure that you put that there. Get that back in place. Nothing really holds it in. Once you got the snorkel in, it can't go anywhere. So, let me slide this in from the back side. And let me try to work that. There we go. Also, remember to line up this pin in the front. This has to slide into that rubber grommet. Keep a close eye on your clamp because it's definitely going to try to work its way out of there, and then it's just going to get in the way. So essentially what you're doing is you're sort of juggling the snorkel, the front sliding attachment, and then trying to get this to pop in. Alright, so we find the easiest way is to take the bigger clamp and drop it down over the bottom one just for temporarily so you can slide the boot in place. So you can see there's a step or a ridge there. That ridge should be fully or surrounded by the upper boot, and the other side should look exactly the same. Once you're satisfied, that the snorkel is fully inserted in the boot. And we're going to get both hands underneath. We're going to lift that clamp up and tighten it up. All right, so I set the clamp up high because I want you to see that if you end up like this is incorrect. You can see the face of the boot where the clamp is supposed to rest, just below the clamp, and the clamp is up high right up against the bottom of the boot. This is incorrect. If you end up like this, you need to loosen that back up. We got to drop that clamp down so it rests right on the face, so it seats exactly where it was designed to seat on the snorkel. All right, so now we see the clamp in its proper position, and you can see it, we're centered around the top. We've got a little bit of the boot sticking out of the top and the bottom, and we're on nice and secure. Once you lock that down, doesn't hurt, go back down, check the one on the bottom, make sure that's good and snug. So now you have your clamps in the back of your Cobra locked in place. You have the slide-in pin in place, and then we just have this harness that we're going to set right back on. There's a stud in the back here that this will just slide over and pop on. So there's your top end. So at this point now, we're basically ready just to throw the rest of it together. We've already put our boot back in here. You have one right here. This will slide over that. Do the accordion side first. Just slowly get that lined up. Just work that up and down, and that'll slowly go in. There we go. So that's popped in. You want it relatively straight and level. And we'll just tighten down on those two clamps. And don't forget to pop in our breather tube. We're going to work this back and forth till you hear the click. Then you know it's in and secure. Alright, so last but not least, as I say, you can see the outside. We'll do the two outside bolts first. We'll get this bracket bolted back up. And you'll have to wiggle around until you can feel the screw drop in the hole. There we go. And just get a couple threads going there. And on the other side, once we get the two outers in, the two inners pretty much line right up because they're sort of in a blind spot where you can't see very well. So we'll do this by feel. So I've got the 4 bolts back in now on the rear bracket. We got that up out of the way. So now we're ready to slide the cover in. You can angle it up and sort of eyeball where the studs are going. Get them fairly close. Watch the foam, it's going to catch on those studs. Let's see if we can find that. And then reach up under here, because there are no really locating pins on these, so these are not easy. They don't just drop right on. You got to play with them a little bit to get them to line up. So now we have our cover on, the 4 screws are back on. Don't forget to put your oil fill cap on there. So essentially we've got everything installed, everything's locked down, everything's tightened up. What we're going to do now at this point, you'll start your vehicle, let it sit and idle till it's fully warmed up, give it a good 6 to 10 minutes, and then just take it for a drive and let everything basically set itself as you're driving. So when you're ready to get rid of that throttle issue on your Supercharged 4.2, either on the 06 to 09 Sport or the 06 to 09 Full Size Range Rover, just give a call to any of our knowledgeable salesmen at 1-800-533-2210, and thanks for watching.